Okay, so Australia were playing Fiji in St Etienne, and the first, well, is it a shock? Well, Fiji have won 22 points to 15, and I think Australia were lucky to get one of their tries in the first half, completely against the run of play. They were 12-8 down at half time. They were second best. They were beaten in the tackle area, in the breakdown, in the scrum. The only area where they had equality was the line out. They have been bashed today by this Fijian side. Fiji should have beaten Wales, and we can argue about the refereeing standards and were they hardly done by, but this Fiji side, you would think the emotion out of that game might have taken out of them. No, they were motivated, and they have, well, demolished Australia. If not on the scoreboard, they demolished Australia. This is a moral victory as well as and a psychological victory as well as an actual physical win. Australia were terrible. I mean, yes, Donaldson slots the opening penalty on 3 minutes. But then Australia were the second best side. They were, on the back foot, doing more defending than attacking. Kuravoli has slotted 2 penalties on 11 minutes and 21 minutes. Then the Tanawasi, I think that's how you pronounce his name. His try in 24 minutes. Yes, it's a quick line out, and that's well taken. But I will say this: they earn a penalty dubiously, and I think that penalty should have gone to Fiji because the Australian player has not fully released the tackle and is still handling the ball on the floor as the Fijian player is trying to place the ball for his scrum half. So you could argue against the run of play they got lucky with that try in the first half. But then Kuravoli slots 2 more penalties on 27 and 33 minutes. Fiji are controlling this game. Now, should they have had a try in the first half after the Australians bungled a line out? The referee said, the Fijian defensive line isn't set. They still managed to cross the line, and it's chalked off. So, Fiji could have been ahead by more. Australia are lucky to get their try in the first half. Second half, box kick. From Kuravoli, and no one wants to claim the ball. I don't know what Nakakwata, Tanawase, and Gordon are doing. They both pull out of it, bounces, and Turisova just picks up the ball and runs half the length of the field and scores in the corner. Because no one wanted to claim the box. It was a poor box kick. It didn't have enough distance. Didn't go far enough. The Australian players, the Wallabies, they just watch it. They all pull out of going to claim for it. They make a complete mess of trying to clear up the situation. And Turisova goes down, scores in the corner. And Kuravoli's had a brilliant day with the boot, converts that one. He will go off injured shortly after, which is a shame because he was really running the show. He's a very young scrum half, but he was running the show, bringing his forwards and backs into play, setting up plays on dummy passes and dummy runs. He was really calling the shots. Lamani, who started against Wales, he comes on. He slots a penalty on 66 minutes. Now, this is where Australia finally get a bit of momentum and start putting pressure on Fiji. But it's always the breakdown is where they lose the ball. The breakdown was a mess. Their scrum was a mess. In the tackle area, they're being dominated. The only area where there was a weakness with Fiji is when they replaced hookers and they had their backup hooker come on, their substitute hooker come on in the second half, and then the line out starts to wobble a little bit for a period. And this is where Vunivalu gets his try. There's pressure building from Australia. They've got to respond. They're 22-8 down at this point. They've got to have some fight. Now you could argue Vunivalu should be playing for Fiji. You could argue that. You could argue Korobiti should be playing for Fiji. There's at least 3 or 4 Fijians in this Wallabies setup that are mercenary players, is the best way to describe it. Most Korobiti and Vunivalu are rugby league players who were bribed with big contracts to leave the NRL and go over to play for the Wallabies. It was the same with what's his name? It was the same with Israel Folau. He was given, big money to swap codes, and it hasn't paid off for Australia. Then that money they're spending on these big contracts to lure rugby league players, be it Australian or Pacific Islanders, over, could be spent on grassroots development, could be spent on the domestic game in Australia, which is just not up to scratch, and it shows on the scoreboard, and it shows in their declining performances at World Cup since they last won in 1999 and last really made a drive and looked decent in 2003. Yes, they've made a final since then in 2015, but this Aussie side is nowhere near the side it was in the 90s and the 2000s. The decline is noticeable now. Vunivalu, yeah, he scores his try, he supports the rolling maul, he supports the forwards. Australia are getting desperate. Donaldson converts, and then we have the kick tennis, and again that accuracy. I mean, the Fijians win the kick tennis, and the Aussies are having to clear their lines from deep. They're not running it from deep because they haven't got a forward platform to do that because they're being dominated in the forward pack. So their backs are playing off back football. They're losing the breakdown, they're losing the contact, and then they end up giving away a penalty right at the death, which Lamani unfortunately slots wide, so Australia do get a losing bonus point. But I will say this, they're lucky to get a losing bonus point. Fiji were fantastic. The only weakness they have is at line-out time when, you know, Matavesi's not the hooker. I think that's the only weakness I can see in this Fijian side. They were very unlucky against Wales, and we can argue about the refereeing and some of the decisions in that game. Now, that on another day would be refereed differently, but they fully deserved their win today. And those 2 bonus points they took against Wales could prove and should prove absolutely crucial in this group, because I can see Fiji potentially, depending on how Australia-Wales goes, in their remaining games, the remaining games they've got to play, actually topping the group. I can see that potentially happening because of that losing bonus point, that try bonus point they got in the first game. Australia were dreadful. I said before the World Cup when I did the preview video, Eddie Jones is not the saviour as in the coaching setup for this team. The players were very, very shocked when Rennie was sacked. They were completely dumbfounded. They've won 1 game under Eddie Jones since he's been installed as head coach. Let that sink in. This is a side not doing very well, is in worse shape than England and Wales, and they could be the Tier 1 nation, maybe alongside Scotland, for example, in the South Africa group, potentially, that fails to get out the group. I could see Australia being one of the top-ranked nations failing to get out the group stage. They struggled against Georgia. They weren't convincing. Yes, they won that game, but they weren't convincing in victory. They've been bashed, and I mean this, absolutely bashed by Fiji today. Fiji were fantastic. They wanted to run more than kick. I think that's very, very obvious. They wanted to stretch the play, which is very obvious because the Australians were crabbing in and leaving overlaps. And if a couple of passes go to hand, we could have seen, you know, more Fijian tries. The fact that Fijians only scored the 1 try really surprises me with how they were attacking. And we're talking desperate Australian defence and that last pass or little knock-on, little handling errors. They were ripping Australia to pieces. This Australia side is not a good Australia side. There's no doubt on that. And paying players like Vunivalu and Korobiti to leave rugby league, not play for Fiji, with big centralised contracts is not helping the Australian domestic game at grassroots level, where the money could and should be invested. And look at the Israel Folau saga that blew up a few years ago, and the money he was on. Rugby Australia have definitely got their strategy wrong. They are continuing with these mercenary rugby league players being brought over to plug the gaps that rugby union is failing to fill through development. And so I can see Australia really. I think Wales, while they're not playing well, they're winning. I can see Wales Australia being the game of the pool, and whoever loses that is going home. But Wales are in a strong position with their bonus points. But if Australia lose that, they're done. If they win without a bonus point, they're done. That is a bonus point win must, and I can't see Australia doing it. I can see Fiji and Wales getting out of this pool, and Australia maybe slipping below third. They could be in serious trouble. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Fiji, fantastic. Place your thoughts on the game below, and I will obviously have a roundup of England versus Japan, which is the final game today, later on this evening. So thank you very much for watching, and I will have some more content for you very, very soon.